Hello and welcome back to another episode of You OK Hun with Miss Greater Manchester Galaxy. My name is Paige and here we are to talk all about things mental health, body positivity, self-care and everything and anything in between. Just a disclaimer, I am not a mental health professional. I'm a mental health advocate, which basically means I fight the stigma around mental health and body positivity and spread as much positivity as I possibly can. So today we are joined by a very special guest. We're joined by the lovely Ashleigh, who is the current UK National Miss South Yorkshire. So welcome to the podcast, Ashleigh.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Lovely to have you on here. I'm really excited. I mean, we have met before and you was really, really lovely when we last met. So it's really nice to have you on the podcast. So we're going to be talking about OCD today, aren't we? And kind of like the breaking the stigma around it a little bit, because people seem to think that OCD is all colour coordinating and things being in straight lines, but it's a lot more than that, isn't it?
Yeah, it's so much more. There's a lot that goes on kind of like internally, kind of that then leads to kind of see.
Yeah. So if you just want to tell a little bit kind of about your background, you don't need to go into a full story, but just a little bit about your background.
Yeah, so I'm now 29, coming up to 30. And I was I kind of first noticed something was wrong about kind of like 12 or 13, but I didn't actually get diagnosed until I was like 17, nearly 18. So it's been like a long road, obviously, of like dealing with it and stuff.
Yeah. So you said that you started noticing your behaviours when you was young. Was it kind of families and friends that noticed it, or your teachers or anything like that, or was it something that you picked up yourself?
It was like I just thought this is not normal. Like I was just doing stuff that like wasn't normal. I thought it's not normal to like have to have a whole bedtime routine that takes like an hour and a half before you can get into bed. Like I thought, not right. So I did my own research and I was like, oh, maybe it's this, when I found out about kind of OCD and stuff. But it took me until like 17 to actually go to the GP and for them to like start me on the road to like getting proper mental health help and stuff like that.
Yeah, and it's funny you should say that, because I was told from my doctors when I was about 13, 14 that I had bipolar disorder, but I wasn't diagnosed until I was 17 either. And I think that they do wait until you're kind of like an adult to diagnose you with kind of like the more severe mental health disorders. So it's interesting to see that from, another mental health disorders perspective as well. Can't get my words out. So what was kind of the first behaviours that you noticed when you was young?
So it was like it all kind of like stemmed from like monsters under the bed kind of thing, like when I was like really young. And it would be like checking in the wardrobe and checking under the bed, and then it was like, oh, now I need to make sure the window's locked, so somebody doesn't come in, and all that kind of stuff. And it was like, it's weird because with OCD, you know that what you're doing is crazy. Like, it's not like you don't for 1 second think that what you're doing is like normal in any way, but you have to do it. And that's what makes it so different than just like, oh, I like things to be colour coordinated. That's what makes it different, is that it's like weird, but you just keep doing it.
Yeah. And you hear the word OCD being sprung about a lot by people going like, for example, if something isn't straight, they go, oh, my OCD is kicking in. And it's used more as kind of an adjective than an actual mental health disorder, isn't it? I don't know if you noticed that as well.
Yeah, that I don't get annoyed by a lot, like I'm not overly sensitive and stuff, but that's one thing that kind of grates me a little bit, because I'm like, you have no idea like what it's actually like.
No, I completely understand. Like when people say, when someone has a mood swing and they go, oh, she's being bipolar today, like, no, that's a mood swing, that's not bipolar. So I completely sympathise with you. I get where it's not annoying in a sense, but it does just grate on you. Like these mental health disorders shouldn't just be thrown about like an adjective. Like, they are things that people actually do suffer with, and we shouldn't be using them as adjectives, should we? We should be taking them more seriously. And I do think OCD is one that isn't really taken as seriously as what it is. So I'm quite glad that we're having an episode around it, and that you can kind of share your experiences and advice around it as well.
Yeah, because people don't really think about OCD as like you say, like a serious mental health kind of disorder, but it can really impact your life depending on kind of what kind of like how it presents and how far it goes before you get help. Like mine was that bad that, I mean, because I was diagnosed when I was 17, so I was under CAMS technically, which was like children's mental health.
Mm-hmm.
But the woman that kind of did all the assessments and diagnosis and sorted out like the treatment plan, she said, if you were 18, I'd be recommending sectioning you because you'd be an adult. So yeah, it was impacting my life that much that I was kind of at that, you know, that crossroads point where it's like, right, you either get help and you find what works for you and learn to manage it, or this is just going to be like a lifetime battle kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. And do you find that does it still affect you now to this day? Do you have a nighttime routine that you have to go through or anything, or is it a bit more controlled? Yeah.
I still have. The thing is, like, anybody that says, oh, OCD can be cured, like, it can't at all. You just learn to manage it. And because it's an anxiety disorder, the less anxious you are, the easier it is to manage it. So, like, nowadays I don't really have much anxiety, really, to be honest. So I find it easier to manage. And some of the things I do are kind of a bit more out of habit, I think. So I probably could not do them. It's just a habit to do them. But I do still have like a nighttime routine where it's like, oh, if I don't check this, somebody might break in and this might happen and I might not be covered under my home insurance. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And it's funny that you should say it's in it, because I didn't know that it was an anxiety disorder. So I'm glad that you said that, because I thought that it was, I knew it had some form of anxiety around it, but I didn't know it was in the group of anxiety disorders. So I'm glad that you told me that, because I've learned something new now.
Yeah, I think it's more grouped with anxiety disorders because of the, like, you need those two distinct parts for it to be OCD. You need the obsessions and the compulsions, and it's the obsessions that create the anxiety. And then obviously, like, you do the compulsions to try and like relieve it. So I think that's why it's grouped in with them. But it does make sense, really. Like, when somebody actually sits down and explains it to you, it's like, this is what's going on in your brain and this is why you're behaving this way. You're like, oh, it makes sense.
Yeah. So do you find that if you are going through a particularly anxious period, say, for example, like, obviously we both do pageants and we know how anxious you can get around pageants, do you find it more stressful like on the lead up to the pageant, or do you find... Yeah, so like normally when I get like stressed, the like compulsive cleaning side comes out. So it's like you know, I'm washing my hands a lot more than I normally would and all that kind of stuff. It's still nowhere near as bad as it was when I was first diagnosed, not by a long stretch, but you know, I'm kind of taking more notice of like, oh, that's dirty, and it's like, no, it's not, you cleaned it yesterday, like it's not dirty at all. But you know, it's just a way to like ease that anxiety. Yeah, no, I completely agree with that. And because the reason why I asked is because I know that if I've got to run up to something quite big, my anxiety can get quite bad, and then it can start kind of affecting my bipolar disorder as well. So I wanted to see if that was kind of like the same with OCD. So it's interesting to know that, you know, even though they are different disorders, they work in the same way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, but OCD is it's a bit of a strange one, because even though it's like an anxiety based thing, it's also like really prevalent that you get depression alongside it, because you've obviously got this anxiety, but then you start feeling overwhelmed, and because you start feeling overwhelmed, you then start like not feeling in control, and then that can like send you in a downward spiral. So it's a bit of a strange one that you've kind of got both going on.
Yeah. And what advice would you give to people out there where they need to kind of sit and think whether it is OCD and they may need to go and see a GP, or whether it is just kind of, what's the word I'm looking for, when it's not just your standard colour coding and things like that? Like, what do you reckon is kind of the first sign that somebody thinks, right, maybe I need to speak to a professional?
If you feel like you're doing like a particular behaviour because you need to ease anxiety, so like if you don't do it and you then get anxious, that to me is a sign that like, okay, maybe there's something like a little bit deeper going on. And even if you think, oh, well, maybe it's not that serious, it's always worth going to the GP, because I had cognitive behavioural therapy, and it worked like in conjunction with other stuff, and it worked wonders for me. And if you've got like a less serious form, you might just need a few sessions of CBT to just kind of like rewire your thinking a little bit to make it kind of easier. So that would be like my kind of like advice as like a warning sign. If you're doing something because you feel like you have to, that is the warning sign for me.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And I'm glad you've said that about the GP as well, because I think definitely a stigma around people going to the GP for mental health disorders. Like, I know so many people that like are really, really struggling, or even just struggling a little bit, but they refuse to go and see the GP because they're ashamed to kind of go to counselling or get CBT or go on medication or anything like that. So it does need to be more normalised that it is okay to go and see your GP about not just OCD or bipolar, but any mental health disorder whatsoever.
Yeah.
There's still a massive stigma around it, and it is something that we definitely need to fight and kind of put out there that it is okay.
And even if, like, I've had GPs that have been really good, and then I've had GPs that have been not great, to be honest. Like, we've all been there.
Yeah.
But when I went for kind of the OCD, my GP was very much kind of, I don't want to say like a member of the old guard as such, but it was a very like old school GP, and it was a bit like, oh, like that's not even a real problem. Like, why are you coming to me about it, kind of thing. And I was like, well, it's a problem for me, so I want you to refer me. And at 17, I thought that was pretty brave, but you know. And I thought, no, I'm not leaving here until you listen to me. And he begrudgingly referred me, and I'm so glad that I kind of stuck to my guns. So, as well, if you do go to the GP and they don't seem that fussed about it, don't be disheartened. Like, keep fighting, because you know yourself and you know what's right for you. So if you go to the GP and you think, oh, well, they haven't really like helped me there, go back and keep doing it until you get a referral.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. You've definitely got to stand your ground with some of these GPs, because some of them are amazing. I've come across some amazing ones, but I've come across some not so great ones as well. And you definitely, people get disheartened about that, don't they? That, oh, well, the GP isn't helping me, so maybe I don't need help. But like, if you think there is something wrong, there is nothing wrong with getting a second, third, even fourth opinion. Like, you know, if you, like you say, you know your own body, you know your own head. If you know that something's wrong, then that's not down to a GP to say, oh no, there's nothing wrong with you.
Yeah. Like, just keep going, and don't be afraid of, you know, things that might be a little bit out of your comfort zone as well. So if they refer you for CBT, or I had exposure and response as well, which is usually used for phobias, and that's deliberately putting yourself in a situation that's going to make you anxious to try and overcome it. And that was completely outside my comfort zone, but I thought, that person's recommending it, so I'm going to try it. And it worked. So, you know, don't be afraid of things that you think, oh, I don't know if that's going to work, because you never know, it just might.
Exactly. And just quickly, actually, I've just thought, while you just mentioned phobias there, I don't know if this is a stereotype or not, but do people with OCD generally suffer with kind of more phobias, or is that just a stereotype that?
I don't know if it's necessarily that we've got more phobias. I think it's more the thinking that goes into the compulsions. So when I was really bad with it, my thing was all about contamination, because I didn't want to get ill, and I didn't want somebody else to get ill. So I would obviously like wash my hands loads of times a day. Everything was bleached. I went through so much bleach, it's not even funny. Like, I had to think the impact that I had on the planet with the amount of bleach that I used. And you know, I had my own fridge because I didn't want my food to be cross-contaminated with other people's and all that kind of stuff. So I suppose it is a phobia in a way, because you're petrified of becoming ill. But it's not a phobia in the normal sense, I suppose, where it's like, you know, if you've got a phobia of spiders or something like that, it's a bit of a, it's a bit of strange. I never really thought about it as a phobia, actually, but I suppose in a way it kind of is.
Yeah. I mean, it was something that I just heard not long ago, actually, and I just thought I'll ask whether that's just a stereotype or not. So basically, so you don't get like the big phobias of like, you know, arachnophobia and things like that, but phobias of other things like what you've just explained.
Yeah. And I suppose like kind of like whatever the consequences of you not doing it is, I suppose, is your phobia. I suppose. Yeah.
No, I completely agree with that. And just one last thing to ask as well. What would be your advice to somebody who is going through OCD and maybe they're stuck in a bit of a rut, or they don't really know where to turn, and kind of outside of obviously going and seeing a GP, what would your advice be to somebody?
Something that I used to do, I got it as a tip after my original like therapy and stuff, but I still use it now, is first of all, don't beat yourself up. So I now still have times where my OCD is worse than at other times. And, I've been doing therapy for years for this. So don't beat yourself up. You're not going to be cured, but you can learn to manage it. But one thing that I do really advise is to have something that I call worry time. So especially if you've got an anxiety disorder, set aside a time of the day for like 10-15 minutes where you let yourself worry, and you can write down all the things that are worrying you, but you leave it at that time and then you park it afterwards. And I find that helps so much. So that would be my one piece of advice.
Do you know what? That's really good advice, because sometimes there was this thing that I heard, which I have spoke about on another podcast that I've done, where basically your brain is like a jar, and you just keep on filling this jar with things until the point where it kind of gets right to the top, and then it starts overflowing, and then it comes out in other ways, like in anger or upset or anything like that. So to do what you've just said and have 15 minutes of worry and 15 minutes of writing things down or whatever, that's kind of releasing things from that jar that's in your head. So that's really, really good advice, to be fair.
Yeah. And then when you're in a better place, you can then go to your list and say, okay, let's have a look at, what things can I deal with right now? What things can I actually deal with? Because some things you can't deal with, but you still worry about it because it's human nature. But when you're in a better place, you might look at that list and you might go, I don't need to worry about that because there's nothing I can do. You can get rid of it, and all of a sudden your list gets smaller. So that's something that I still do now.
Amazing advice. Thank you so much, Ashleigh. And just one last question, actually, while I've got you. It's a little bit kind of away from the OCD, but what are kind of your goals in life? So is your goal to fight the stigma around OCD, or have you got kind of goals bigger than that, smaller than that? What would your general life goals be?
So I do a lot of work with kind of like deaf awareness and hearing loss awareness because I'm deaf as well, so that's my platform in pageants. But I do try and challenge mental health stigmas along with that. But my ultimate goal, I think, would be to get sign language on the curriculum.
That would be amazing, because
my
sign
ultimate
language is something that I've always wanted to learn, but it's never really kind of advertised anywhere where you can go and have classes for these kind of things and whatnot. So I do agree. I do think it should be on a curriculum.
Yeah, I can direct you to a free course for level 1 sign language if you would be interested. Yeah. So the Doncaster Deaf Trust do a free level 1 course because we've got a deaf school here in South Yorkshire, so they run a free course. But that's my ultimate goal, to get it on the curriculum.
Oh, amazing. Right, well, definitely send me that over and I will try and promote it as much as I can as well for you.
Brilliant, thank you.
No problem at all. Well, thank you so much for coming on, Ashleigh. I really appreciate it. You've been amazing, and thank you so much for kind of sharing your story and being so open. I definitely think we're going to help hopefully, as long as we help just one person, that's all that I ask for in these podcasts.
Yeah, even if you just help one person, you've done, you've done a good job.
Exactly. Oh, well, thank you so much for coming on, Ashleigh, and thank you very much. Can't get my words out now. Thank you very much to everybody for listening. These episodes are going to be uploaded every single Tuesday around 7 p.m, so make sure you stay tuned. If you do need any advice for anything that we have spoken about today, I will put in some helpful helpline numbers, email addresses and websites in the information of this video, whether you're watching it through YouTube, Instagram or your usual Spotify provider. But again, thank you very much for listening, everybody.